Hi, I'm Elizabeth Namovsky, host of Finance is Personal. In this episode, I partnered with the United Macedonian Diaspora to talk about depression, anxiety, loneliness, and give yourself the gift of emotional resilience this holiday and beyond. Now, we've all been at home self isolating due to the pandemic or living our different new normal. This has disrupted and changed our lives, in some cases for the better, but for many for the worst. And all of these issues we're facing are not new issues. However, they've been highlighted and brought to the forefront with grief, lockdowns, unprecedented uncertainty, economic worries, and other challenges of the coronavirus and COVID 19. Now, today I'm joined by Dr. Yelena Kitsmanovic, who is the founder and director of Arlington, DC Behavior Therapy Institute in the Washington, DC area. She's a cognitive behavioral therapy expert with over 25 years of experience in psychotherapy, teaching, and conducting research. She's also an adjunct professor of psychology at the Georgetown University. Originally from Sarajevo, she graduated magna cum laude from Texas A&M University and earned her master's and PhD in clinical psychology from Temple University in Philadelphia. Now, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat option, and we will do our best to discuss them when we are open to discuss the Q&A. So let's begin. Now, Yelena, let's talk about the fundamentals. What are the fundamental things that we can do to reduce anxiety and depression and strengthen our psychological resilience?
So first of all, I'm so happy to be here today, tonight, for some people morning, for some people evening. Thank you for having me on the show. I have to start with saying that, anxiety and depression and anger and frustration and interpersonal problems have been showing on quite a bit for most of us during this year, especially since March, since most of us have been dealing with some kind of lockdown and a profound change in everyday life. And an important thing to remember is that that's not surprising, and it's actually quite normal. As I often talk to my clients, to my patients about this, that, I would be surprised if all of us were just kind of going through this without any negative emotions showing up and, without struggle, without pain, because the situation is abnormal, and having strong emotional reactions and thoughts and worries is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. So first thing is, to say it's okay not to be okay, right? We've heard this refrain, thankfully, I would say, more often this year than I've ever heard it before, this idea that, about toxic positivity and, the idea that it is okay to say I'm struggling and this is hard and I'm really sad and sometimes I need a mental health day, as we say sometimes in America. So that's the first thing to remember, and that can help us also bring self-compassion and kindness to ourselves when we are suffering and when we are in pain, and not be critical and self-critical and kind of harsh toward oneself, whereupon you would say, well, snap out of it, what's wrong with you, why can't you be as motivated as usual? I hear this, it seems to me, every day. Just this morning I was talking to a client who was saying, I don't know what's wrong, I just can't seem to get going and get motivated and get excited about applying for grad school. And I said, we are living in the worldwide pandemic. That's it is not shocking that's where you find yourself. And so being accepting of the feelings themselves and the thoughts and the physical sensations that will show up is actually quite fundamental. There's a saying that goes way back, more than 100 years ago. It's attributed, as far as we know, to Carl Jung, who was a Swiss psychiatrist. And in translation, originally it's in German, but in translation, it says, what you resist persists. And the idea is that, the more we try to push away, avoid, run away from these feelings that will show up as part of, normal living, especially normal living in the pandemic, the more they're going to actually come back to haunt us, and kind of it's like a boomerang, right? The more you try to push away things and again distract yourself, run away from it, minimize it, say it's not okay to be suffering and to be in pain, the more they actually do come back with a vengeance. They can come back with a vengeance. And that's often when we actually start slipping into more serious, clinically meaningful, either depression or an anxiety disorder, like it can be generalized anxiety disorder where you worry constantly, you can't fall asleep, you're constantly, kind of have anxiety, anxious arousal, and you are, keyed up, you can't relax. I mean, I talk to so many people who say, I really cannot relax. I go,
So let's just step back for a second then, because sleep.
Yes.
Like I can tell you, I have been having trouble sleeping, and a lot of my friends have been having sleep problems, and it's increased dramatically right now during the pandemic. And it actually leaves us feeling exhausted and a little, out of tune with ourselves. We're frustrated and vulnerable. And it actually goes into many other psychological problems. So what can we do to stop our minds from racing? Because the couple of things that you talked about in the previous question was, we are our worst enemies, and we need to actually be kind to ourselves and kind to others. So what can we do to stop our mind from racing as we lie in bed? Because when we're doing that, your heart starts going as well. So how do we just improve our sleep in general?
So here I would talk about what I call about pillars, main pillars of emotional resilience and mental health, which are really important for sleep, but they're also important for reducing this possibility of slipping into very serious anxiety or depression. And there are really a couple of basics, and the way I like to think about them and talk about them is think about a man or woman on the prairie in evolutionary past. How did they live their lives, right? They lived their lives outside, right? They were awake when the sunlight was up. When it was dark, and they went to sleep, right? They didn't have artificial light. God knows they didn't have any electronic devices. They were very active. They were, hunters and gatherers and, chopping stuff and climbing and stuff, whatever. So very physically active, completely opposite from our sedentary lives, general sedentary lives, and especially during the pandemic, right? So they were, under the sky and getting sunlight. One gets sunlight even when it's cloudy for hours of the day. I talk to many, many people who answer my question, how much do you spend outside? How much do you get sunlight? They say, well, these days, most days, 0. And then sometimes maybe half an hour, if at best. And, living life that it's so different from how evolutionary past has created us, it's gonna have effects. I mean, basically, evolution takes millennia, right? And we have evolved to function really well in that ancestral environment, right? When we're very active, when we are outside quite a bit, when we sleep with the dark, when we are not constantly 24 hours exposed to hypothetical threats, right? You would be exposed to threats from time to time. Of course, it was hard to live on a prairie, right? But not this idea of 24 hours news cycle where you're constantly exposed to threat and danger potentially anywhere in the world, right? And so, and then also another thing that how people lived, they lived in close-knit communities, close-knit tribes. And of course, we know we are in America, especially, right, the most individualistic society in the world, and we live more alone, and we function more alone, and we're more isolated than anybody else. So when you think about all of that and you look at that sort of evolutionary mismatch, you clearly have answers of what we can do, even a little bit. I'm not suggesting that we're all going to go now and become, REI guides and, live outside for 8 hours and then sleep with the sunlight and, live out, in the camps outside. Some of us might. That's great. I have fantasies about that kind of life. But I think, for the most part, if you can just change even little bit. If you're not going outside, get some sunlight. We know biologically this makes a difference. This biologically, it not only creates vitamin D, which by the way, just taking a pill will not do it. But it creates all kinds of other changes in your body, which will make you sleep better and which will make you less depressed, and which
It's
will
a stimulant too for you.
it's crucially important. And if you can, when you're outside, if you can move, I mean, you don't have to be a triathlon, you don't have to be one of these, amazing gym rats and so forth, but just moving your body, not
Right.
being sedentary constantly. Putting a timer on your cell phone for every half an hour to just get up and maybe walk for 5 minutes, and then every couple hours go for a walk outside, 15 minutes, half an hour. It makes huge difference. It's actually really interesting how small changes in our behavior can have amazing effects on our sleep and then on our mood and anxiety. So move, get outside, be with other people as much as you can now. I mean, in any shape or form you can right now. And then prioritize sleep. Don't short change yourself. I mean, we've gotten ourselves into this, very unhealthy culture in America here, especially where, it's just work longer hours and, when you're dead, you can sleep, the saying goes. Well, that's ridiculous.
Too late
Because
then.
it is not, because it's not healthy. We know now sleeping less than you need, and we need, the average is actually about 8-9 hours, which people get, are shocked when they hear that, because on average people sleep 7 hours, it seems, these days. And so most people sleep less than they need. And how will you know how much you need? Because it is on a normal curve. I always ask people, on a vacation, last vacation you had where you were really relaxed, let's say you don't have small children running around, how much did you sleep? Well, that's how much you need. And so don't shortchange that, prioritize that. 2 hours, actually neuroscientists suggest 2 hours before sleep, turn off your devices, get off devices. I know that's unrealistic for most of us. So I will suggest to my clients, for my patients, okay, at least an hour. Okay, give me an hour, an hour, turn it off. Don't have your cell phone in your bedroom. Do not charge. You can charge it somewhere else, right? For the last hour before sleep, it's really nice actually to take a hot shower an hour before sleep and then start cooling down the environment and dimming down the environment. Both of those things kind of mimic, what would happen in nature in a way, and they do promote sleep.
Well, what's really interesting, I heard on the radio that right now, because of the pandemic, a lot of people are on their devices at least 19 hours a day, which actually tells me that
Yes.
people are sleeping 5 hours a day and not the 7 that you thought was really bad.
Yes.
So we're not sleeping, which makes us emotional. And so a lot of people are struggling emotionally, and sometimes it turns into anger and lashing out. And we don't have patience. And right now they were talking about divorces, like the divorce rate has gone through the roof as well.
Yes.
So how do you prevent or change that?
Yeah, it's a huge problem. I can tell you that, looking just at our referrals, we have a practice with 12 clinical psychologists working. So we have a lot of people calling us, and just looking at the trends from March on. First of all, for first couple of months, people, actually there were less calls because we had to switch to teletherapy and virtual therapy, just like we're doing this right now. And so I think at first people were uncomfortable with that, but after people realized that this is not short-term stressor, that this is going to be a long haul, people said, well, that's better than nothing. So we started getting more calls, and we've been getting a lot of calls since about May. But couples therapy and then therapy for adolescents and kids in this area, mostly schools have shut down, so the kids have really suffered and adolescents have really suffered, have gone especially through the roof. So I can tell you, couples therapy, I've been scrambling to find more couples therapists, honestly, because it is really hard. It is hard. People are stuck at home, often both working from home. If they have children, the people who have elementary school, especially children, American Psychological Association survey has shown repeatedly over 6 months, are by far most stressed because they're basically trying to homeschool their kids or do home daycare and work from home. That's a lot. And then again, they're sleeping less and they're not going out. And they're all these other distractions of a good sort, where, socializing with people, going out to eat, sports of different kinds. that has all shut down. So there are no outlets, there are no relaxation outlets. So, how do you change that? Well, it's not easy. However, becoming more mindful of, our tendency to sort of act out of that frustration and anger. That's the key thing. People say, how, they come to us and say, Doc, can you make me less angry? Can you take away this frustration? Well, I have to break it to you, but I can't, because turns out we cannot control emotions. We little bit indirectly, but for the most part, it's safe to say we cannot control our emotions. If we could, I wouldn't have my job, right? So what we can control is our behaviors, and to some extent our thoughts, but emotions, they do what they're going to do. Okay. So in terms of anger is not the problem. The feeling of anger is not a problem. It's our acting out of anger. It's, me becoming short, yelling, screaming at my spouse, at my child, at my partner, and so forth. It's, slamming doors. It's, silent treatment, which is another kind of form of behavior, right? That's anger behavior. That in turn then, makes your relationship suffer. And then when the relationship suffers, you're more likely to get more depressed and more anxious and more angry. And so it's a spiral, right? So what do you do is, the first really step is to sort of look within, to become, very aware of your body. I say when you try to really just become a little more in tune with what you're feeling, the best place to go is your body, right? Ask yourself next time when you're kind of noticing and becoming more curious about your own emotional experience, ask yourself, so what actually goes on when I say I'm angry or frustrated? What's actually going on? That I have certain thoughts in my mind, right? And I have certain feelings. For some people, it's like this kind of, really hollow feeling in the stomach. For some people, they get really hot and red, right? For some people, it's like their throat closes up. For some people, heart rate goes up, right? It can look different, right? Anger is an arousal emotion, so it looks somewhat similar, actually, physiologically, as anxiety, as fear. It's a fight or flight reaction, and so become curious, and then more acquainted, basically, with your signs of anger. And if you do this again and again, kind of look within, you're going to then be able to pick up better when those first telltale signs show up. And the sooner you figure, the anger is coming, you're going to be able better to control your reaction. Again, not emotion. Emotion is going to do what it's going to do. Right. To say, you open up a choice. You slow down and open up, a space, and where you have a choice how to react. You can say, I'm getting angry. Okay, I think I'm going to just go off in the bathroom a little bit and maybe, splash some cold water on myself, or go do a relaxation technique. We're going to talk about kind of quick ways to de-escalate your arousal.
10 is actually pretty good too. Just count to 10 before you say or do anything.
Exactly. And so, but first you have to create that space, you see. So becoming really in tune with your emotional experience. And again, body is the best way. You're like, here we go. And, I work with my clients, and they're able after a while to really say, the first thing that happens to me is like, I get this almost like headachy thing in my, that's the first thing that happens. Okay. We know that's a sign, right? And then you say, okay, here it's coming on. I better remove myself from the situation, and do something to de-escalate and so forth. And then I can come back when calmer.
So I want to move on to loneliness. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of single people that are self-isolating at home. We are tangible. We like to hug. We like to kiss. We want to be loved. That's what life is all about. So I look at loneliness and vulnerability, and they are a mix for letting your guard down and becoming a victim of romance scam. Mm-hmm. I am launching season 4 of Finances Personal in January. Mm-hmm. And I actually just finished reading a book called The King of the Con, and I will be interviewing 2 sisters out of San Francisco about what they've been through. It's a very raw, emotional situation that they've been through. But I want to talk about the romance scams and other frauds. Like, what are some preventative measures that we can take in order to protect ourselves from falling into this?
Well, I think the first thing is to, again, become more in tune with one's emotional experience, and realize, when are the times in your life when you are particularly vulnerable. It's okay to be vulnerable. We are all vulnerable from time to time. Most of us are vulnerable, have been vulnerable, have found ourselves being vulnerable this year in many ways. And, especially if we are lonely, especially if we're isolated, especially if we don't feel like we are part of any kind of group. It can be a small family unit, it can be a bigger group, it can be that all layers of groups you can be part of. And if you feel like you don't belong, like you're very lonely, and you really striving and would really like to have, especially romantic partner, then that's a very human need, and that's okay. And recognizing that people can misuse this.
Right.
I think in those situations, one just has to be really careful and really vet people much more than you might normally,
Yeah.
especially online. I mean, online, the ways we have learned to kind of vet people and to trust our instincts and so forth, which are also not always true, but we are better doing that in person. We know that. Again, evolutionary, we've learned that, but we haven't learned how to do it online, right? So what do you do when you're starting to talk to somebody? Do a background check. Get some basic background information. Talk to your friends, talk to anybody who say, okay, well, what do you think about this? Like this is the story, this whatever. Do you think something shady is going on here? We have this policy when we get emails, even as therapists, because we get scams from time to time. People will tell you, oh, I have this child and they're in a different country, and could you do therapy? But you first, I will send you money, and just, weird stuff. I very quickly can pick up, of course, when it's a weird language, but sometimes it's not that obvious. And, we have this agreement among ourselves, the 12 of us, right, that if it sounds even slightly off, you kind of, just kind of your hair's up a little bit, share it with everybody else.
Yeah.
Share it and get opinion of other people. They can get an input.
Yeah,
And
spidey senses are very important.
yes. So that's the key is, again, recognizing that we are in that state and that's human, and being kind to ourselves, and then putting these safeguards in place.
I always tell people, especially when we're talking about fraud or anything like that, do not talk to strangers. We were taught as children not to talk to strangers, to protect ourselves.
Right.
I think now more than ever, it has become more evident. If something just doesn't feel right, do not talk to strangers. And I always say, stop, pause, think, and then delete if it's some sort of an email. Yeah. But when we're feeling depressed or anxious, one of the fixes is impulse shopping. And I'm a financial literacy advocate. And this is something that I'm extremely passionate about, helping people, with their finances and getting out of debt. But when people are depressed or anxious, they always think, you know what, I'm going to go buy this special piece of whatever it is that they want to buy. It's $1,000 or whatever. And they do impulse shopping, and they get a very short-term high. Mm-hmm. Then they've got that long-term low because they just bought something they can't afford. And how do they deal with that? So how do you deal with all that?
Well, shopping can be, of course, very detrimental to our bottom line. So it's a problematic, because then it can lead to other psychological consequences. And it's also similar to a lot of this sort of impulsive distractions, let's call them, right? When we feel low, when we, again, this year has brought upon us so much pain and so much suffering, and surveys do show that actually, a stunning amount of people have been feeling depressed and anxious and frustrated and so forth this year. It's easy to look for these short-term fixes, going shopping. And these days it's mostly online shopping because people don't go shopping that much. And it seems to me it's almost more tempting and thus more insidious and more dangerous online, because you can just click next thing, click next thing, and next thing you know, then the bill comes, right? Or you see it. So it can be shopping. It can be, of course, common one. It can be alcohol. It can be
binge drinking is huge right now as well.
It is. That we have data to show that drinking has gone up quite a bit, actually, during the pandemic in most countries. Very similar also. Momentarily makes you feel better. turns out, and even you can fall asleep better, but turns out when we talked about sleeping, people think, oh, if I drink just a little bit, it's going to help me fall asleep. It's going to be great. Yes. And you're going to wake up in the middle of the night, because when metabolism of alcohol kind of starts finishing up, that's right at that 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and you're going to be up and you're not going to be able to fall back asleep. So actually, again, it's a short-term fix, but it's a long-term, a long-term pain, so same with shopping, right? Long-term consequences, but many others, right? People will just kind of to veg out, to just kind of completely not think about the reality and the future, which is really scary and very uncertain. I've heard more, people binging on Netflix more than ever, right? And there's time and place, of course, to watch movies and to watch Netflix, to watch series, but I've literally heard people do like a whole 4th season of Crown on Saturday, and whole season of whatever is another series of Netflix on Sunday. That means you haven't moved, you've been in front of a screen, as you said, for 9 hours, and temporarily, of course, it's going to feel good, right? Whether it's a high or just okay, but you pay the price. You always pay the price. It can be video games, it can be any kind of distraction. So the answer is, Aristotle said it, everything in moderation, right? I cannot say that there's not time, and especially during this hard year like now, and during the hard times like now, there's not, time and place for distractions when you need to just not think about here, now, and reality and future and your relatives and everything you worry about, but you need to check out a bit from time to time, of course, but just don't overuse it. Be like, like they say, the French women are really good. They eat really bad stuff, but really in moderation, right? They eat very little and from time to time. So kind of that's the idea, just be mindful that you're not, starting to rely habitually on this. If you are seeing, well, some alcohol on Monday, well, maybe before it was on a weekend, and now maybe, well, just Monday, maybe that's kind of close to the weekend. And the next thing it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you skip Thursday, and then Friday weekend starts again. And what happens, and this I hear again and again and again, you're going to feel better in the evening, you might fall asleep better, but then you're going to wake up in the midnight, you're going to feel groggy in the morning, and your anxiety and depression are going to be worse in the morning. They always are. For people who are prone to depression, anxiety, the drinking the night before, it's not just hangover. You can be even like not very drunk, just drinking even like a couple of glasses, you're going to feel more anxious and depressed in the morning. It's a very, I looked actually to see if there's any research looking at that sort of, neuropsychologically. I haven't found it, but I've experientially heard it from so many people. So, just don't do it every night of the week, do it 2 nights of the week, but not every night, be mindful of that, so you don't fall into that trap.
So people are really stressed right now. We've had 9 months of this pandemic, and in the beginning, people were anxious because they didn't really know what was happening. It was wear a mask, don't wear a mask. Well, you need a mask. Okay, you need to do this. And there were so many different variants of, what you should do to protect yourself. So now we've got an entire society that's stressed, but this is the beginning of it. And we've got 6 months from now, and we've got a year from now. So it's easy to become helpless and hopeless in the current situation. How can we overcome these mindsets in order to protect ourselves 6 months from now or a year from now?
Sure. Well, I'll first tackle helplessness. Helplessness is hard, and it's insidious, where basically what it means is I don't feel like I have control over the situation, right? And not surprisingly, a lot of people are feeling that way, that it's outside their hands, right? All I can do is put the mask and socially distance and not do all these crazy things that we're not supposed to be doing in the middle of the pandemic. And some people are not doing that, but a lot of people are doing that. But beyond that, it seems you can do nothing else but wait for the vaccine to come one day, which of course is not in your hands either. And wait for schools to reopen, which is not in your hands either, right? And wait for the nursing home to reopen so that you can see your elderly parents, which is not in your hands. So it's very disempowering. You're waiting on all of this to change, the life to become, sort of normal at least, and then you can't do anything about it. So it's and that leads very much to anxiety and eventually to hopelessness, which is really becoming very pessimistic about the future, which then leads to depression. So what can you do about it? I advise people to focus on really smaller things that they can control. It might sound kind of silly that saying, well, I can control what I can cook tonight, but it actually is not. They are still, during any given day, there are decisions you can make. New Year's resolutions, a lot of people are talking about New Year's resolutions now, to next year, rely a little less on takeouts. Less of us are going to restaurants, but people are actually doing takeouts quite a bit and eating unhealthily. And unhealthy eating has been also up in the pandemic. And you can say, okay, well, I have a control over that. Maybe I can start just little by little learning how to cook. I've been doing that I've been branching out into Indian cooking. I like to cook. I've always cooked a lot, but I really haven't branched out into, cuisines that are more dramatically different from the Balkan cuisine or American cuisine and so forth. So I've been starting to do, watch some videos and, of course, read the recipes and so forth. And it's something I have control over. I can learn this. It's a new skill. I can decide to do that on the given day. I can, watch the results where it's tasty some of the time, hopefully tastier as the time goes on. I can watch my, people I live with, be happy about this and surprised. So, there are these, little things that you still have control over. There are still actually quite a bit of little things that we have control over, and just really focusing on that and stretching yourself in those domains so that you feel some sense of self-efficacy. I can control this, and I'm pushing myself, and I'm doing this, and I feel better about myself.
So you talked about hopelessness moving into depression.
Yes.
So typically when someone's depressed, they become introverts and secretive. What are some of the signs that we should be aware of and to look for if we think that one of our friends or one of our loved ones is suffering or even suicidal?
Yeah. It's a real concern. One of the big myths with anything relating to suicide is that if you ask people if they have any thoughts of suicide or any intentions of self-harm, that you will somehow trigger them, or that you'll make it more likely for them to do it. That is not true. It is okay to ask people that if you're worried about them. And it's okay to, definitely for professionals, but also for lay people. If you're seeing somebody close to you, or somebody even not that close to you, but you might be on a Zoom call with them and so forth, or you see that they checked out and are not showing up on a Zoom call or Zoom calls, or not answering your phone calls and texts, or answering only from time to time, and in a very depressed way, and you're really starting to worry about them, reach out. And if they don't answer, reach out again. Reach out again. Don't give up on them. Reach out to, and if they sound quite bad, and they're starting to maybe talk about some either self-harm or just this idea of there's really no reason to live at this point, become like really dark, ask them, have you had some like serious thoughts and about it, and and some intentions or some urges, and if they are, then absolutely help them locate a helpline. There are a lot of they have thankfully many more helplines now than they were before the pandemic. Reach out to the helpline, go to DR, reach out to somebody who actually either lives with them or who can come there and take them to an ER, because this actually does save lives.
So, a lot of people, when they're under stress and not feeling good about themselves, we start overthinking a lot of things. And the thing with that is, when we're overthinking things in our own mind, we're the only ones that know what we're overthinking.
Yes.
I don't know what you're thinking, and you don't know what I'm thinking. So my question is, what is a good way to help someone who's always overthinking and exacerbating a problem in their own mind, in their own head,
Yes.
and it leads to the imposter syndrome?
Yes. So I mean, something that I'll say that a lot of people might say, oh yeah, again, mindfulness, because, mindfulness has become almost too popular, a fad of sorts, right? And that's saddens me, because when I talk about mindfulness, I talk about actually mindfulness skills. So that's something that we teach as part of cognitive behavioral therapy now, and that of course has become quite popular, although I think when things become popular, they become very misunderstood. Mindfulness is a very, very simple thing. It's literally a skill that any of us can develop. It's free in a way. You can get mindfulness apps, but you can do it without apps, whereupon you really, all it is in a given moment, focus on here now. When we are stuck in our heads, when we are overthinking, we are always either in the future or in the past. That's the nature of overthinking. That's nature of this repetitive loops that happen in our minds. When it's future focused, we call it worry. The psychologists call it worry. When it's past focused, we call it rumination. When it's more future focused than worry, you're prone to anxiety. When it's rumination, you're prone to depression, looking back over your mistakes. I should have done this. I shouldn't have done this. I could have done that, and so forth. Future is, what if this happens? Oh my God, what if that happens? Right. So you go future, past. And that, there's some fascinating studies that say that like 95% of our time in our minds we spend in future and past, and not in the present moment, whatever we're doing in the present moment. So, all that this, mindfulness thing is a way of centering yourself and kind of reminding yourself that let's focus on actually what I'm doing right now. Like, you can be mindfully washing dishes, which I love because I hate to wash dishes. And so, I found this trick, right? That, mindfully washing dishes means, okay, I'm going to actually focus on what's happening right now. What am I feeling on my hands? It's like a warm, really warm water, but I feel it a little different this part of the hand. What about this part of the hand? And I'm feeling the smell of that, citron or whatever, the detergent's coming. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. And then if I put it this way, like, okay, I can see how it glistens, how this plate glistens in this angle, right? So focus on your experience of 5 senses. That's one of the best ways to bring yourself to the present moment and get yourself outside your head. Literally ask yourself, what am I seeing? What am I hearing, right? What am I tasting? What am I touching right in front of me? What am I smelling? And you can do it when you're walking. You can do it when you are, taking a shower each morning, right? You can do it when you're washing dishes, when you're doing something just annoying, something like quotidian, something that you do every day that, you would be normally so mindless. You would think about everything else, but not dishwashing, right? But just actually be present. And that helps, that really grounding, especially with sensory stuff, it really can help.
So I've never, ever in my entire life heard of anyone describe dishwashing the way you just did.
Okay, well, it's something to try.
I'm going to open it up and go to some questions. There is one question. The question is, I have a friend whose husband was always very easygoing, works for the city in the winter destination town. And since COVID hit, he's become very angry all the time and brings it home. And she works at home. And at the end of a long day for her husband comes home and starts ranting and raving about his day. Mm-hmm. Sometimes she just listens and lets him get his anger out. And other times she reaches to her breaking point, because sometimes our patience just runs thin. And then they have a fight. So what can she do for her own mental health while she deals with her own demanding job, and then takes the brunt of her husband's frustration at the end of the day as well?
Yeah. Great question. Again, as I said, that's happening to a lot of couples these days. So first thing to know is that she's not alone, that this is very common phenomena happening. It doesn't make it easier on her, but it is a part of very common experience right now, especially. So what I would recommend is talking to him not in the evening. No, so it's kind of having meta conversation, basically talking about this bigger problem that she has observed, not in the middle of the evening when they're both at the end of their rope and exhausted and frustrated, whatever. Go for a nice walk. Again, I'm a big proponent of walks, on a weekend when you're actually in a sort of good mood, maybe, and go for a walk and say, I've observed that this pattern. I've observed that this pattern is happening, and I feel that I'm just kind of this receptacle for your anger, and it's making my hard day even worse. And if I just take it that I'm kind of receptacle for this negativity, so it's making me feel worse and it's not improving our relationship. And if I guess react back, right, then we have fight, and we know that that never ends well. And of course we know that you can never resolve any serious differences. You cannot ever have productive discussion or conversation with the partner when emotions are running high. You just can't. It does not work. Physiologically, it doesn't work. You have to actually de-escalate the emotions before you can have discussion. So I would talk to him again during a nice afternoon on a weekend, right? And be curious and say, have you noticed that? And I was wondering, what are your thoughts about whether you would like to change that? I would be really curious about his own experience. Has he noticed that, and is he interested in changing this? Does he think it's a problem, and is he interested in changing that? And maybe then, if he says, yeah, I've actually thought about it, and maybe I should seek therapy or something, then of course being encouraging and supportive and so forth. So that's one thing. Another thing that during that also kind of conversation, she can kind of give him heads up and say, especially if he's unwilling to do something about himself, and if he doesn't see it as a problem, she can say, okay, well, what one thing I can do is when this starts, I am going to go to another room because I will not continue to be part of this. Basically, you can go on ranting, but from now on, it might be to an empty room, or you call somebody or so forth, but I'm not going to be a willing participant of that. So I'm not going to yell back. I'm just going to remove myself from this situation, and I'm going to go close my door and do what I need to do for my mental health and my sanity. And that will change the dynamic. It always does, right? Then he's going to start asking himself like, okay, what now?
Yeah.
And so those are some first steps one can do. And, seeking couples counseling also of course is a good option.
So I'm in Canada and you're in the United States. And in Canada, cannabis is legal. And it actually is part of the essential businesses as well during lockdowns. So one of the questions that just came up was, have any of the cannabis products proven helpful regarding depression and anxiety?
So you're right. In America, like everything else in the United States, it depends on the state. So, in some states it is legal. In some states it's legal, both medicinal and recreational.
Mhm.
In some states only medicinal, and some states none, right? So, we all over the place. In DC, where I live, actually, you can smoke marijuana, and you can grow it, but you cannot buy it and you cannot sell it. It's ridiculous, but that's how it is in District of Columbia, right? So, okay. So has it been proven? There have been some studies showing that it can be helpful for anxiety in particular. Not so much, it tends to be kind of a downer, so it's not actually that great for depression, but it does relax people.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of interest in both that and psychedelics. There's actually a lot of interest and a lot of research.
Psychedelics are becoming the next best thing right now.
Huge, exactly. And that's actually more being investigated more for depression. That's more for depression. NIH here in Bethesda, just outside DC, is running, as we speak, it's been running for years, some studies on psychedelics for depression and post-traumatic stress disorder and so forth. With marijuana, some studies that have been done, and again, I think you'll be seeing more and more studies. They've shown better effects for like arousing emotion, which would be like for anger and anxiety. So it's calming. It's a more calming thing.
So here's the $1 million question, because I don't see any more questions coming in the chat. What can we do going forward to make sure that we are equipped to deal with this negativity? Because it's here for a while longer.
Mm-hmm.
And we need some help to guide us away from the anxiety and stress associated with mental health.
Mm-hmm.
So, what can we do?
So it's basically, they say, take one step one day at a time, but it is truly taking one day at a time. We cannot predict future. We don't have a crystal ball. This is still a long haul. So really thinking, what does the next day bring, what does the next month bring, and within the scope of what I can do, how I can make my life better, whether that's, these pillars that I've talked about, being active, eating healthy as much as you can, prioritizing sleep, prioritizing some recreation, and being with family and friends as much as you can, and then doing something different, something new. I'm a big proponent of, sometimes just because it's new, it's better. Like my Indian cooking is just new, right? And the sameness of pandemic, so much of us, if we are lucky enough to be able to work from home, there's a sameness of life. You don't go anywhere, you at home, maybe in pajamas from waist down. It's all the same, every day is the same. That's hard psychologically. So just think of something that you can do different in January, right? Is it maybe, find through internet, for online, you can find a lot of these, courses of foreign language, official courses, but also, I actually have relatives in Australia who decided to learn Spanish, and now mother, father, and a 5-year-old daughter, they all have basically Spanish instructors from Spain. They found some organization that connects you with people, native speakers around the world, and and it's amazing. They're learning Spanish, and they're also kind of connecting with people outside their bubble, right? And learning something about different culture and so forth, which we have shown that traveling abroad and interacting with other cultures and humans and so forth makes us more creative, and makes us feel better about ourselves, and it brings our confidence up, and makes us more empathetic and more patient.
Right.
So and right now our life has shrunk so much. Our circle is small, so try to expand it. Whether it's again, watching some documentaries about different places, and dreaming and planning where you're going to go after this ends, whether it's learning to play an instrument, whether it's doing some new activity, learning frisbee, to do it with your kid and your dog, whatever it is, do something different, right? And then there are something we didn't touch on, these I call them like band-aid solutions. They are band-aid solutions, meaning that eventually, as we know, when we have a wound, eventually you have to take that band-aid off for the wound to heal. But band-aid can be helpful, kind of short term. And because there's so many situations that are impacting us, and our emotions do flare up, there are things that kind of short term you can do. We talked about getting really worried and anxious, and getting really frustrated and angry. And there are some some of my favorite tricks. One thing that everybody always loves, and I like telling the story. There's something we call dive instinct. So if you get really worked up about something, angry, frustrated, anxious, whatever it is, this kind of arousal emotion, right? Go get a bucket of water, put ice in it. So it needs to be like ice cold water. Close your eyes, and keep your either just hold your breath, or if you need to punch your nose, and then immerse your head as much as you can, kind of up to here, and hold your breath in by having a face in that ice cold water as long as you can. It's called a dive instinct, and it actually is biologically creates a string of reactions in your body where you actually calm down. It's fascinating. It's a really little trick that you can do when you're saying, when I get worked up, what can I do? Go to the bathroom, get your head in the cold water. It actually helps, So there are things like that. There are also relaxation techniques that, it's YouTube is full of different ways you can, breathing, diaphragmatic breathing from your belly, where you breathe on 4 and 8, you breathe out on 8. So you breathe out of your stomach, not out of your chest. There are progressive muscle relaxation exercises that can relax people, mindfulness, as I mentioned. So, there are things that kind of can really help us get over these humps. And then in a longer term, think about, as I said, these pillars of mental health, as well as bringing some variety to your life.
Okay, so we have 3 questions that
Yes.
have come in that I would like to get them all answered before we go.
Yes.
And what you were talking about is really important, because YouTube is so great. It's free. It's 24 hours a day. And so one of my big things with YouTube is I love to paint. So I buy canvases and I paint, and I've got my paintings all over the house. And that to me is one of the most relaxing things. gets rid of my anxiety. Working out does as well. Those are the two things that I do. I paint and I work out. Okay, question. There was a question that came in. Is it wise for a member of the LGBTQ community coming out during a pandemic, especially to Balkan parents?
Oh, well, that's very specific. That's tough. That's tough. I think that, the pandemic is not that much different in terms of, coming out to what repercussions might be as compared to non-pandemic times. The only major difference I could see is that one wouldn't be able to go physically and talk to them in person. And, things get lost when they're not in person, right? So that's the only reason why I could see waiting, is that you want to talk to them in person, right? But, video is fine. We've all now lived on video for so long that I think that it's a, next big thing. And one way, why wait? If you've already, decided that you are ready to come out and tell them, then, not phone, not writing, because that's, you will get a lot, but video is fine. And then in person as soon as possible. And maybe, who knows, maybe, if you can't see them in person, maybe, they'll have some time to kind of process and, sort of assimilate this news before you actually get to see them after the pandemic, so might not be a bad thing.
Okay, that's good. Has the pandemic exacerbated or heightened bipolar symptoms? And what are the signs to look for?
Has it exacerbated bipolar symptoms in some people? I can't generally say yes. It really depends. I mean, it really depends on your particular circumstance. If, the one of the things that is particularly bad in terms of exacerbation of bipolar symptoms is irregularity of life. So if this has, pushed you into maybe a jobless situation where you don't have kind of structure to your life, and your sleep schedule is all over the place, and you just don't have regular contacts or what, with people and so forth, that can absolutely exacerbate it. Then also, if you've been somehow disconnected from providers, from healthcare providers, and you might have stopped your medication. If you are on medications, well, obviously that's going to be a problem, right? So disruption of regularity in routines tends to be unhelpful for bipolar symptoms. So if a pandemic, has affected people in that way, that could be problematic. And what you can do is, again, come back to, as much as possible, even if you don't have a reason to get up in the morning and go, to your job and so forth, create a schedule. I know we all hate schedules, but they work. There's a reason why. They work. So, and if you're prone to the bipolar symptomatology, they're really crucial. So
another question is, one of the number of things this person is doing is checking in with 5 to 10 people a day. Could be a text, an email, phone call. It can be as simple as, how are you doing? Need anything? Phone calls can be more involved and lengthy. Some of the people that this person is contacting are normally upbeat, positive, forward-looking, etc. They're now completely beaten down, and some have given up. What can they say to at least toss them a lifeline or spark of hope without sounding cliched or scripted?
I think, first recognizing that is a huge thing. And, first thing I would do is see if you can, if you can do it without, sounding like, too worried or patronizing, saying, hey, it sounds to me like you're sounding a bit down. How about we schedule a Zoom chat? Right. So if they're just kind of checking in with them regularly, if you're noticing that these particular people are really down, as I said, either they're not not answering your text, or they really sound down and so forth, try. Ideally, it would be meet them in person, socially distant with mask. If you can do that, do that. If they are, it's hard to get people who are feeling like that out. But if you can, by all means, do that. That would be my number one. Short of that, get them on a video, because that's when you can see the face also, you can see affect of people, and and then ask them some serious questions like, how are you doing? How are you doing? How's your day today? How are you having some self-harm thoughts? What can I do? Ask them, what can I do? Is there anything that I can do to help right now? They might not come up with a lot of ideas, because when you are in that funk, you're not very creative, right? And so if they say, but I would always first ask, what could I do? Could you tell me? If they can't tell you, then you start coming up with options, and don't bombard them. Just say, okay, well, I'm thinking one of these three things. Maybe you and me do one of these three things on Tuesday. Which one, right? Could we do one?
Right.
So little by little by little by little, get them out. Get a behavioral activation, we call it. Just get them out doing stuff, engaging with people, moving their body.
See, that's a bit of a problem here in Ontario, because as of December 26th, we're going to be locked down till January 28th. So we're going to be in full lockdown here. But
I see. So you can't even like walk outside, basically, right? No.
Yeah, well, you can for your mental health. You can go for a walk for your mental health, which is really important. And that's one of the things that you've been talking about.
Yes.
There's one more question that has come in, and I think that's it for the questions. If you're generally a happy person and you're looking at the upcoming holidays with gratitude, but everyone around you keeps talking about how sad it's going to be, how do you prevent it from eventually impacting you from all the negativity from the people around you? How many times can you hear it before your mind potentially starts to believe it?
Yes. Well, that's what we psychologists do every day. We, sometimes my husband asks me, well, he doesn't even ask me. He just says, I could never do your job. I don't know how you can sit for 10 hours and listen to people who are down, right? So I could, speak even from personal experience. How do you do that? You kind of take it in stride as all part of human experience, right? These are all emotions, good, bad, negative, positive. It's right now they're more in that space. You are slightly in a different space, and that's okay. We're not sure that 3 days later you're not going to be flipped, right? I mean, maybe you're particularly positive and optimistic and resilient person, and that's great. But just kind of realizing that this is also not forever, and that you also can fix them, that they kind of have to have interest in fixing themselves. You can offer, again, these lifelines, as we said, and suggestions, and try to draw them out. And you can also do only so much, because in the end of the day, again, you're not responsible for other people's well-being. So I would say, for people who seem to be surrounded and find themselves surrounded by mostly negative people, do reach out to some new groups. Reach out to some new groups of people who are, I don't know, again, learning something new. Chess is popular because of the Netflix series right now. So join an online chess group. Find something you find. I'm not saying abandon the other friends, have them too, but find some circles where people tend to be more optimistic and not be active, energetic, and that's okay too. And it's all part of human experience. It's all part of human experience. That's what makes life beautiful. That's what makes my job beautiful. And I think that sometimes even in sadness, beauty and optimism actually can be found. That's you only need to listen to Balkan songs or Irish songs to hear in all the wallowing, there is, fundamental hope, right?
So thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope that you found this very helpful. And remember, to become and stay resilient, you need to move and exercise, preferably outdoors. Socialize, socially distanced, virtual and phone calls. Don't habitually engage in emotional avoidance. Prioritize sleep. Control expressions of anger and frustration, engage in micro adventures. YouTube's really good for that. Savor meaningful past experiences and anticipate future ones as well. And focus on what really matters. The glass should be half full. And stop making excuses that you're too busy. Always make time for yourself. So thank you to Dr. Jelena Kecmanovic and the United Macedonian Diaspora for partnering up with Finances Personal. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you.